Hey guys, this is the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for November 14, 2024. We're going to be doing the Week 11 Fantasy Football Rundown. We're going to be looking at all the games from last week, talking about all the fantasy players and answering any questions you guys have. So feel free to post any fantasy football questions. Super chats questions get to be answered first, but we'll look at everything. And before we intro our co-host for tonight, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description of their merch store. All that would be appreciated. As you can see here, I am wearing November is Sloth Month shirt. And yes, it is the same one from yesterday. That's how you roll when you have two kids under 3 years old. You don't get to shower or change very often. But you can get that shirt and more here for 20% off. So yeah, right here, November is Sloth Month. We have a bunch of other shirts. We just made this new one, Make Garbage Great Again. I can't wait to get that one. I haven't got that one yet. So we have a bunch of these. I'm going to be making some new ones too. I had a couple new ideas. I'm going to be making some mugs. So I kind of got motivated to do that. So be on the lookout for more merch here. But yeah, like I said, you get 20% off. Also, please consider super chats, super stickers. We had 3 yesterday. John Sanders, as usual, always contributing. Thank you so much, John, for your constant contributions. Also, we had Cam McNeagle more recently as well, Slew, and you guys been so great. So any further contributions would be awesome because, like I said, I always say this. It's a joke. It's a running joke these days. I could go outside and pick up change on the street and make more money than I do from YouTube ads. So these super chats are just a great way to keep the show going. Or you can go to Amazon, buy my books. The most recent one is Jerks to the College Years, where I made fun of people during my 6 years at Penn State. Also, how the 2020 MVP was stolen, which was it's allegedly about how Brett Favre tried to steal Aaron Rodgers' MVP award. Hint, it's not really, but yeah, you could probably guess what that's all about. So anyway, we are joined by Mike Luchene, the NFLRoughDraft.com. Mike, how are you? Last time we spoke was a few months ago. How was your season gone?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Fantasy football season, you never know how it's going really until, the playoffs are over. I had a team last year that I think, actually the last 2 years, it went something like 14-1 one year and 15-0 the other year, lost in the first round of the playoffs in both of those leagues. So you just never know. But, it's great to join you again. Always have a blast coming on your show. And, I appreciate that. And also, I am very impressed by how swiftly you're able to navigate through those 1,000 open tabs you have on the screen. That was fantastic.
I know where all of them are too. And believe me, this is nothing. This is just this is the fringe of it. I have 3 more windows open. This one that has 40 or 42 tabs, I think. Another window has 40, but my main one that I'm looking at right now has 84 tabs. And then there's Opera, the browser Opera, which has about, I want to guess, probably 50 tabs or so, and maybe more. And then there's Firefox, which has about 50 or so as well. So we have 200 plus tabs here, and I know where everything is too. It's chaos, but it's controlled chaos here. So I don't know. That's just how I roll, I guess. I actually had way more on this window that you're seeing now. I actually closed like half of them.
Well, that's an amazing tab game. There wasn't one single misclick in there, so that was great.
Yeah, I know everything. Believe me, I know everything. I wasn't lying. I know where everything is. All right. Figured we get to this, and you guys, once again, if you guys have questions about your fantasy teams, like who to start, etc., should I trade? Post them here in the chat. But I figured we'd start going over these games from last week. So we had Ravens 35, Bengals 34 on Thursday Night Football. Just another exciting game between these two teams that had been decided by 4 combined points. Cincinnati once again blew double-digit lead. What else is new? That's what they've done against the Ravens. They did that back in, what was it, week 4, week 5, the first time they played. And then they did it again. They could easily be 6-4 right now. The Ravens could be 5-5 if you reverse these, but that's what the Bengals have done. I thought the biggest takeaway from the Bengals is Chase Brown, 9 catches, 11 targets. He's getting all the receiving work. Zach Moss is getting that before. Now he is. He's been dropping to the 4th round of best ball drafts that I've been doing, only because he hasn't had his bye yet. And I try to avoid guys who haven't had their bye, but like he's just so tempting to take just because he has such a big workload in that offense. For the Ravens, Derrick Henry did not have his best game. It's kind of a little surprising, I thought. But then again, the Ravens were playing from behind. Tylan Wallace comes out of nowhere to ruin our same game parlay because we had Zay Flowers. If Zay Flowers went over, we would have hit our same game parlay. Unfortunately, he did nothing. So I expect him to bounce back. So any takeaway from this game?
For me, it's just the rate in which the Bengals are throwing the ball now. Jared Smola is a big fantasy guy on Twitter, and he sent out some data earlier this week that showed that the last 4 weeks the Bengals have been throwing the ball almost 70% of their plays. And obviously Chase Brown has been a benefactor of that, but Joe Burrow as well. I have one of my big FFPC leagues. I've kind of been playing the matchups with Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, and I got to a point this week where I don't think I can play Jaden Daniels over Joe Burrow anymore. Jaden Daniels has 9 touchdowns passing this year. Joe Burrow had 9 touchdown passes last week. So, for me, it's just the rate in which they're throwing the ball. They might be getting T. Higgins back this week. If not, certainly he'll be back soon until, he trips on a blade of grass and re-injures himself for another month. But, I think the Bengals are a really enticing fantasy offense right now because of how much they're throwing the ball.
Yeah, T. Higgins, I'm sure is just going to find some way to get hurt again. Which I don't really blame him because he's going to get that big contract this offseason, and you kind of see what happened to so many other players who got hurt this year. It's been kind of a massacre in fantasy.
So I was thinking about T. Higgins earlier. I want to run this past you. What do you think? So he's going to get to the offseason. Obviously, he's a free agent. The Bengals probably aren't going to franchise him again. That's going to be a really interesting deal. Now, I'm wondering if he's going to sign a 1-year deal for a lot of money, or if some team out there is going to actually commit long term at the price that I'm sure he's looking for, with his lack of durability over the last few years. Do you have any thoughts about what you're expecting and when free agency starts with him?
I'd be surprised if he doesn't get a huge contract. We've seen lesser receivers get big money. Like Christian Kirk got $80 million. We'll see. Darnell Mooney got $30 million or something this offseason, maybe a little bit more. There have been so many mediocre or slightly above mediocre receivers who have gotten big deals. And now you're going to get T. Higgins, who I think is a legit number 1 receiver. Now, he's not like in the upper tier, but I think if you were to rank the receivers just off the top of my head, he's probably 15 to 20, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think he's around that area. And I think that some team is going to offer him a massive deal. I don't know who has the most cap space. Salary cap NFL. I imagine any team that has a ton of money to spend. Like for example, I'm looking at the Browns have $46 million in cap space. Like they traded Amari Cooper. Maybe they sign Higgins away from their rival. The Patriots have a lot of money, and they have a rookie quarterback on their contract. So I think they would offer him a ton of money too. So one team I had in mind is like the Giants, but they're stuck with that stupid Daniel Jones contract. So maybe not him, but so you could go to like any team that has a lot of money and a big need at receiver, and I feel like they would be a candidate to sign him for a big deal. Like Dallas is $20 million in cap space. They have nothing outside of CeeDee Lamb at receiver. Like I'm sure Jerry Jones, in a desperate attempt to be relevant in his final years, really just not to sugarcoat things. So he wants to win now. I think that he would be willing to sign Higgins to a big deal to pair with Lamb. So I do think he's going to get like a huge contract. Do you see it going that way too?
Well, you're right about the wide receiver market. The wide receiver market's been totally out of control. I don't even know if you can say it's out of control because wide receivers are so important in the modern NFL. But I guess what I'm thinking is I'm just curious. I know he's going to get a lot of money. I'm just curious to see if someone's going to commit 3 years of guaranteed money now, or if he gets something like 27, $28 million guaranteed, but for 1 year. That'd be an awful lot of money for next year. And NFL contracts, going past 2 or 3 years, nothing's usually guaranteed anyway, unless it's a quarterback. But I guess I'm just curious to see, is somebody going to go with the 3 guaranteed years or 3 mostly guaranteed years of money, or is it going to be like, 1 huge year?
Yeah, I mean, all it takes is one team, right? That's really all it is. It's not like a consensus. Whereas like some teams might be scared off with the injuries, but one team desperate enough to sign him, I feel like they're going to offer him a lot of money, a lot of like several years, as you said, just because there's going to be one team that's desperate and needs a receiver, and he's going to be the best player on the market at the position. So yeah. I do see it going that way. So I'm saying I have a lot of tabs when I'm working too. Walt learned the hard way one day that Chrome said has no alert me before closing multiple tabs option, like 30 of them gone all at once. Don't you have like a history? I feel like I close my Chrome all the time, and there's in the menu there's history, and then it says like restore tabs or recent tabs, and you should be able to open them all up. So hopefully you can still do that. You can't do that event like after a certain amount of time, but. Cassandra, hope you get those tabs back. Anyway, let's get to the Germany game, Munich game. Panthers 20, Giants 17. Thank goodness this is the last one of these. So sick of these stupid 9:30 a.m. starts. I don't know how you feel about them, but I just like it's just so like I guess like for me it's a little bit different because I work all night and I go to bed at like 6 a.m. So like I tell myself before going to bed, I'm like, instead of being like, oh, I'm only getting 2.5 hours of sleep tonight, I'm like, oh, I get to take a 2.5 hour nap. Like that's how I treat it. Just feeling optimistic. But I hate these early games so much. I'm glad they're over. But anyway, we saw the Giants just thoroughly embarrass themselves in this loss to the Panthers. They now are 2-8. Tyrone Tracy was the lone bright spot until he fumbled in overtime. He had 18 carries, 103, and a touchdown. He looked great outside of the fumbles. Malik Neighbors, I don't know where he was until like the fourth quarter. 6 catches, 50 yards. That's just not going to cut it. I don't know. Like the Giants refuse to throw to him. And I know the Panthers have J.C. Horn, but number one receivers have torched the Panthers all year. DJ Moore, for example, had like a great revenge game against them. Like if you look at the Panthers results, like number one receivers have just crushed them all season. And so I was really disappointed by Neighbors. And then he almost had that 45-yard completion that hit the ground. For the Panthers, Bryce Young had a decent game, I guess. It still wasn't very good, but pretty good for him, I suppose. Chuba Hubbard looked terrific. And then you have Jonathan Brooks coming back next week. Nothing really from the receivers, but only 126 yards. So there was only so much those players can do. So what are any takeaway from this game?
Not really. I mean, I think the biggest news to come out of the week for fantasy football with that game was Chuba Hubbard getting extended to that deal. I think a lot of people were thinking that was going to be Jonathan Brooks at some point very soon, and now it certainly looks like that's going to be a two-headed monster, which isn't really great for either of them in terms of fantasy football. And then with the receivers, honestly, it's more about dynasty at this point. Jalen Coker is an interesting prospect. I don't know. Some people are really excited about him. We'll see what situation they have next year. I don't think they're going to go into next year with just Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker, and Thielen will probably be gone. So they'll probably bring someone else in, and that could make Coker completely irrelevant. But it'll be interesting to see what those receivers do next year with whatever quarterback is there. It's probably not going to be Bryce Young at this point. Aside from that, I don't think there's anything really new or exciting to come out of this game from a fantasy football perspective.
Yeah, that receiver could be Higgins. It's interesting you said Bryce Young may not be there. But if the Panthers win, they won this third game. If they win a couple more games, they might be priced out of taking a quarterback in this draft. So they may have to wait another year. And I wonder if they're going to be stuck in the same situation as the Giants with Daniel Jones, where it's like they never really got a chance to replace Daniel Jones, so they kept on, keeping him as the starter, and they eventually extended him. I don't think the Panthers are going to extend Bryce Young if he plays like this, but they may be stuck with him in 2025, which makes me wonder if they're just going to sign a veteran, someone better than Andy Dalton, to compete with him at this rate.
Like Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. He's pretty bad. I don't expect Daniel Jones to be starting much longer. We might see Drew Lock on Thanksgiving, unfortunately. Yeah. Which I as bad as Daniel Jones has been, I think that's a downgrade.
Great.
Yeah, Hawkinson or Njoku. I would go Njoku. The Saints have been so bad against tight ends this year. Hawkinson's going against the Titans, who they have a shaky linebacking core after they traded Ernest Jones, but the Titans have been pretty decent for the most part against tight ends. Not so much lately, but for the entire year, whereas the Saints have been awful against tight ends all year. So I would go Njoku. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Titans actually somehow have the number 1 ranked defense in the NFL, as long as you sort that by yards. Mm-hmm. This is a tough one. I'm personally going Hawkinson. The matchup isn't as good as with Njoku, but if this is a PPR league, I'm going Hawkinson just because it looks like he's back to basically his full workload, if last week was any indication. And that could be a solid 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 targets. So I'd go him, and if it's not PPR, I'd go Njoku.
Okay. Vrabel to the Giants, I would like that. I like Vrabel quite a bit. And we had this Pharaoh was asking, how's it going? Got offered Breece Hall, Jacoby Myers, and Jaden Reed, and he gives a Joe Mixon. What do you guys think? What do you think about that? I think I talked about Joe Mixon. I think it was last week. The Texans' playoff schedule gets pretty difficult. So the Texans in the fantasy playoffs, they go against the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. Dolphins not so much, but Chiefs and Ravens against the run, they are both in the top 5. So I would consider this, even though Mixon is the best player, and he has a great matchup this week against the Cowboys, but it gets a lot tougher. So you get 3 for 1 there. If you're really hurting for depth, especially, I would do this. If you're kind of like stacked at the top, and then maybe you got to think about it. But what do you think about this trade?
Yeah, I'm usually in favor of just taking the side of the deal that has the best player in it. But I think Breece Hall, at some point can sort of take a step up in production from what he's been so far this year. So I like the Breece Hall side, but I'm gonna put an asterisk next to that and wonder who's getting dropped for Jacoby Myers and Jaden Reed. Obviously Jaden Reed is a worthwhile player. At the very least, he's a bye week play, a great bye week play. He's a solid starter, and Jacoby Myers is a solid bye week play in PPR as well. So I'm taking the Hall side, but I'm also in the back of my head, I'm hoping that you're not dropping quality players to make room for those guys.
Yeah, also worth noting, Myers and Reed have had their buys already, so you get that. Hall and Mixon have not. All right, let's get to the next game. So we have Bills 30, Colts 20. This is really 30-13. The Colts got a garbage touchdown at the end. Joe Flacco was horrible. He was supposed to be the safer quarterback, but apparently not. He threw 3 interceptions, and he could have had more. So the Colts have gone back to Anthony Richardson, which makes me happy because I've been drafting Richardson pretty aggressively in like the 18th or 19th rounds in best ball draft. So I feel like I got a good value there. Taylor had a good game as expected. Buffalo not that great against running backs. And Josh Downs 7 for 72, but he dropped a touchdown. So that was frustrating for anyone who played him in DFS like me. For the Bills, James Cook, no surprise, 19 for 80 and touchdown. None of the receivers were great. Hollins 8 for 86, and it's good for him. But outside of that, Shakir had a Shakir type game. He's always like 6 for 60, 7 for 70, something like that. He went 6 for 58. No Amari Cooper, no Keon Coleman, but they're expected to be back. I think Cooper is expected to be back this week. And Kincaid, a bit of disappointment here, 2 for 24. Kincaid has a great matchup this week. I don't know. We'll see if he takes advantage of that. He hasn't really stood out this year. I expected more from him, but he plays the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have been woeful against tight ends. So we'll see if he can meet expectations. So any takeaway from this game?
Yeah. So with Kincaid, it's just a matter. I don't know if he practiced today. I thought I saw that he didn't. I could be wrong about that. So if if he doesn't play, I mean, you want to keep an eye on the Friday practice report for the Bills. And if Kincaid's not playing, or if Kincaid's not practicing on Friday, then it's an indication he's not playing. Dawson Knox is an interesting streamer at tight end this week. If Kincaid's out and you're kind of hurting at tight end. For me, the other takeaway on the Colts side is, I like Richardson certainly has, a much greater fantasy football upside as a fantasy quarterback. But I personally downgrade the rest of the Colts offense with him in there, just because, Taylor was getting more targets with Flacco, and Josh Downs. Josh Downs was my guy in the preseason. I drafted him all over the place, but he's getting the targets with Richardson, but Richardson's completing like 40% of his passes. So he's had some really interesting lines where he's had like 12 targets, but finished with 4 catches for 40 yards or something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Obviously, the only Colt to benefit from this is Alec Pierce, because Richardson loves those deep shots to Pierce. So, if you're playing DFS, I think Pierce is worth a shot, and not a high entry lineup, but like one of those $3 entries. Just throw Pierce in there, kind of like you could have thrown Marquez Valdez-Scantling in there last week and just benefited. I feel like those hit or miss guys are always worth a shot if you're playing like $3 lineups or something like that. I love the Dawson Knox call, by the way. He's only 3,500 on DraftKings this week. So if Kincaid is out, Knox is definitely someone you want to target there. So I like it a lot. All right, we have Vikings 12, Jaguars 7. This was one of the 2 very frustrating games of the week. For me, I had Vikings -7. The Vikings outgained the Jaguars 402 to 143, and yet they only won by 5 because Sam Darnold threw 3 interceptions, 2 in the end zone, another one in Jaguars territory. There was a 4th interception that was called back by penalty. He was a complete mess. And this is not the first week. As the prior week, he also had a couple interceptions at the end zone. So this is maybe the beginning of a trend. We'll see. I mean, he was brilliant to start the year. People are even saying MVP candidate, which I always thought was nuts because they adjusted Jefferson. It's like, it's not even the MVP on his team, but okay. But still, he has been downgraded recently. I think a lot of that has to do with Christian Darrisaw being out, and they traded for Cam Robinson. He's okay, but he's not the same. You just discussed Hawkinson. He went 8 for 72. It was the best fantasy player they had. Aaron Jones, by the way, we had his receiving yards over, and he had like 13 receiving yards in the second quarter, and then he got hurt. And then he came back eventually, but he didn't really do much after that. And that was so frustrating. But he should play, I guess. You never know. You might want to check that. For the Jaguars, there's really nothing to discuss because Mac Jones is horrible. Brian Thomas Jr., who was consistently being taken in like the 4th or 5th round of best ball, like he's just undraftable now in the first 10 rounds, I think, just because no one could throw the ball to him. And Trevor Lawrence is going to be out already this week. So any takeaway from this game?
No, not much. I mean, I guess you hit on most of the points that I agree with. I guess to add one thing though would just be Tank Bigsby for a little while looked like he was kind of running away with that job. I didn't think it was ever going to be sort of like an 80%, 90% takeover though, just because he doesn't catch passes. And now that he's hurt, I know he came back and got like a second carry. Yeah, he got hurt on the first carry of the game, came back, had a second carry. Now he's questionable for this week. But even if he plays, you're looking at a guy who's completely touchdown dependent, and he's probably going to have 50-55% of the carries at most with none of the targets. So I think Bigsby was someone who was sort of big earlier this year, but if you have him in a PPR league, there's not much there, and this offense is a mess. So even later in the year, I mean, I can't see him having a high upside. I'd rather roster someone like Ray Davis and a good offense where at least if the starter gets hurt, someone you'd be excited to put into your lineup.
Yeah, I agree that he's droppable at this point. Depending on how deep your league is and whatnot. But I think it's like a standard, like a regular 12-team league with PPR. I think you're right. I think you can be dropped. Unless you're like really hurting at the position. Following up, Ferris says he would drop Broncos defense and Pearsall. his receivers are Neighbors, Pickens, and sadly Tyreek Hill. So I don't know if I should do as I already think my receiver depth is good. So I still like the trade. I wouldn't want to drop Pearsall. I like Pearsall, but it's not like he's this amazing player you can start every week. So I do like him, but yeah, I don't think you need Broncos defense. Like you don't need two defenses. Yeah, I mean, you could probably maybe counter offer where you only trade two players and then maybe you get something back too, or I don't know. You probably just try to figure something out. Maybe you could trade Pearsall as well and get someone else or something. Just get creative, but I still think I would do the trade.
Yeah, me too. And by the way, great job with your draft or putting that team together. That's a really solid team. Yep. I personally wouldn't want Broncos defense. Walt's right. Drop them. I personally wouldn't want to drop Pearsall. He was decent last week. I wouldn't expect him to repeat that. But I like some of these first round or high, first, second round receivers late in the season because we've seen in the past that's really when they tend to sort of come around, and a lot of them in recent years have been top 24 overall receivers in the second half of the year. So I'd rather sort of take sort of the lottery ticket of Pearsall rather than having Jacoby Myers, who's solid, but his upside is really capped in that offense.
Yeah, for sure. Mooj asking, is there any defense this year you're not dropping even on a bye? What do you think? I'm usually fine unless it's like a dominant defense. I just get into, but like, has there been a dominant fantasy defense this year? I just like off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
No, I remember looking at the Chargers schedule, and late I think in the season they have a decent schedule. But the other problem with that is you never know who's going to get hurt and what the defense is even going to look like, and you never know who's going to get hurt. Even on for other teams. Like, for example, the Cowboys haven't been having a good year, but now you see the Cowboys coming up on the schedule and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick up the defense that's playing against the Cowboys because Dak Prescott's not there. So you never really know what's going to happen. I just drop the defense on the bye.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Yeah, Chargers play against Bo Nix and Drake May to finish up the fantasy playoffs. Sit one, Aaron Jones, Chase Brown, Terry McLaurin, or Pickens. That's pretty good. It's a good quartet there. I think against the Eagles, I guess probably McLaurin. It sounds crazy to sit McLaurin, but actually, you know what? Maybe against the Chargers, you sit. No, here we go. I think it's maybe Aaron Jones because he's banged up. I think it's him. I think it's Jones. What do you think?
I'm going to agree with you. Aaron Jones here, unless it's not PPR. If it's not PPR, I'd say drop Terry McLaurin.
Okay. It's a good team. it's a
good problem. Terry McLaurin.
Yeah. I'd sit Jones right now because he's banged up. He has a rib injury of some sort. He missed a good chunk of last week's game, as I just said. Unfortunately, that receiving yards over didn't hit, but he might play, but like he could be limited. All right, we have Steelers 28, Redskins 27. This is really 21-20. There were two touchdowns scored on special teams in this game, so it wasn't as high scoring as you might think. Jane Daniels really struggled in this one. He only completed half his passes. He only rushed for 5 yards. I think that might be a look ahead to what's going to happen in that Ravens game because the Steelers handle mobile quarterbacks extremely well. But I mean, Daniels did complete some deep passes to McLaurin, so it wasn't all bad. For the Steelers, Russell Wilson also completed half of his passes, but 3 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. He just goes bombs away sometimes. He completes deep balls to Pickens and Mike Williams for the game-winning touchdown. Najee Harris got banged up in this game too. He had 21 carries compared to Jalen Warren 14. I haven't heard anything on Harris missing this week's game, but it's something to monitor. And if Warren is out there, I know he's owning like 60-something% of the ESPN leagues. If somehow Warren's available, definitely pick him up because there's a chance Harris is going to be limited or sidelined this week. So any takeaway from this game?
Yeah. So Najee Harris didn't practice today. So again, that's one of those guys where you want to check the practice report on Friday. Friday is the day. If he's not practicing Friday and Jalen Warren's probably not on a waiver wire, but maybe he's sitting on someone's bench who isn't paying attention. You can throw a trade offer out there. He's definitely enticing. My takeaway here is, I don't know if Jaden Daniels, if his ribs are, holding him back from running or what's going on, but the team's been winning. He's been fine, but the fantasy production's come down a lot in the last few weeks. And I know some of this was just sort of like they, ran a couple balls in from the goal line, and that would have looked, Jaden Daniels' fantasy production would have looked way better if he ran it in or, threw short touchdown passes. But, they're a great team, but I don't love them from a fantasy perspective right now. And from the Steelers, I know it's not what the fantasy community wants to hear, but Russell Wilson's just such a better quarterback than Justin Fields right now. He's winning games for them. It's night and day what that offense looks like with Russell Wilson at the helm compared to Fields. But in fantasy football, obviously quarterbacks who run the ball end up putting up big fantasy points. So it's not as enticing there.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to come back to earth at some point, but Russell Wilson you're right. I mean, he's been so much better than Jaden Daniels. Justin Fields, not Jaden Daniels. The better than Justin Fields. It's truly remarkable how because he was basically given up for dead. The Broncos are paying most of his contract. He was terrible the past 2 years, and suddenly he gets a new chance in Pittsburgh and takes advantage of it. So again, I do expect this to regress to the mean at some point, but I guess you just have to ride the wave at this rate, and it's helping Pickens. Like we had that quartet from that question from Storfus. We didn't even look at Pickens just because he's been doing so well with Russell Wilson. So and he has a great matchup against Baltimore this week. So anyway, we have Chiefs 14, Chiefs 16, Broncos 14. This easily could have been Broncos 17, Chiefs 16, except there was the blocked field goal at the end. Of course, the Chiefs go to 9-0. We'll see if that lasts this week against Buffalo. They're underdogs. Isaiah Pacheco got cleared to practice, so we don't know if when he's gonna be back. But when he returns, I assume he's just going to take away Kareem Hunt's role right away. Maybe not right away. Maybe not that first game. But I would say game 2, it's going to be all Pacheco going forward because Kareem Hunt, he's been productive for fantasy purposes, but in real life, he's just not nearly as good as Pacheco. So Pacheco is just going to take that job. Travis Kelce, 8 for 64 and a touchdown. He's been so good ever since Rashee Rice got injured. That's just opened them up, and I don't feel like that's going to regress at all. And then DeAndre Hopkins stepped down from the week before, but he had to deal with Patrick Surtain, so you can kind of understand that. Denver, the big takeaway here is Audric Estime, 14 carries, Javonte Williams 1 carry. I don't know if you expect that to continue, but Sean Payton has he is on multiple occasions he has shown disdain for Javonte Williams, dating back to May when Javonte was in Sean Payton's doghouse. And so I guess he was just looking for an excuse to bench him, and he finally found one in Estime, who's just a tough runner. So I think that if Estime is still in your league, still on the waiver wire in your league, then try to pick him up. I added him in one league this week. So any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, and we've been hearing for the past couple of weeks that Estime was going to be more involved in the offense, and then it didn't really materialize. And all of a sudden this week he was the starter. So certainly if he's still on the wire, make sure you go and add him. But aside from that, I think the only real takeaway here is that Travis Kelce is starting to come along in this offense. He's starting to get a lot more targets than he had earlier in the year when the receivers were healthy. And Xavier Worthy, in redraft, it's getting to the point. As much as you don't want to draft or drop, an explosive receiver in that offense, he's just not doing anything with the targets he's been getting. It's getting to the point where he's kind of just eating up a roster spot unless you're in a deep league.
Yeah, I wouldn't own him in a regular league. If you're drafting best ball, obviously, you want to get him in the later rounds because he could always score a deep touchdown or something. But 1 for 11, just not going to cut it. And he's had so many bad performances. You're right. Like, and he had a chance for a touchdown. I think it was a week ago. I believe it was a week ago. And he couldn't get his second foot in bounds. So he's had some chances, but he's so inconsistent. And I thought maybe after the bye, usually rookies get a bump after the bye. That hasn't happened for him. In fact, he's regressed even. I don't think there's a reason to hold on to him at all in redraft leagues. All right, so 49ers 23, Buccaneers 20. This was the other very frustrating game for me because I had 49ers -6, and -5.5 in the Super Contest, and they only won by 3, even though they outgained Tampa 413 to 215. They averaged 6.8 yards per play, whereas Tampa averaged 3.7 yards per play. They averaged 3.1 yards more per play than Tampa, and they only won by 3 because Jake Moody missed 3 field goals, and they also muffed the punt to give Tampa a free touchdown. Now, if Evan's our Tuesday co-host is listening to this, he's probably yelling. He's like, well, that's what they always do. They always screw up, but it was still kind of maddening to watch. Anyway, McCaffrey didn't play much in the first half because Kyle Shanahan said it was too hot, which is very weird. And then he got more touches in the second half. I'm not sure what that was all about. I think the big story, though, for the Niners outside of McCaffrey is Jennings, 7 for 93. Pearsall, 4 for 73 and a touchdown. Like this is the future of the receiving core. And so I expect them to continue to play well. Jennings, I think, could have a monster finish to the season. Whereas Tampa, there's not much to say about Tampa right now, but they're going to probably get Mike Evans back after their Week 11 bye. So Week 12, we should see Evans on the field again, which will make their offense functional again, because right now they can't really do anything outside of, I guess, stiff arm Nick Bosa. So any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I'm just going to be interested to see if Cade Otton's targets sort of diminish a little bit once Evans gets back. And if they don't, he's probably going to finish the year as a top 5 tight end in PPR, if you go by points per game. And then again, Pearsall, I mentioned before, I wouldn't feel great about putting him in a lineup, but he's the type of guy I like to have on my bench going down the stretch, just because he's, again, I want guys on my bench who are going to have a high upside, where, they're either going to be guys where I'm like, yeah, I'm putting him in because, he's developed and, we'd have to see more from Pearsall, even though he had a good game. He's getting 7, 8, 9 targets a game, which he's not yet. Or no, I don't want this guy because he's not getting targets and not been playing. So, like, for example, I had, just going back to the previous game, I had a buddy ask me yesterday, well, I have Javonte Williams. Should I go get Estime? I think he had to trade for him in his league. And my response was like, well, honestly, if you're going to be competing to win that league, you don't really want either of those guys in your lineup. You'd rather have, a running back who's catching a bunch of passes, doesn't have like Jaleel McLaughlin there to be annoying and take away, a lot of those running back targets. And so Pearsall is kind of one of those guys where, again, I don't want to play him right now, but down the stretch, I might. And then if he, doesn't end up with a larger role than what he's had these first few weeks, I'll just drop him and pick someone else up.
Yeah, I agree. I think you want the more upside guy who doesn't share anything. So question here from John Sanders: Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud? Keep in mind this is a PPR league. Very important for those batted passes that get caught. I would go with Daniels. Stroud hasn't really been that great recently. Now he's going to get Nico Collins back. But Dallas is such a run funnel defense. I think they just might run Joe Mixon into them and rush for like 200 yards, and then Stroud doesn't have to do all that much. So, and Daniels might be playing from behind. So I go with Daniels. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, if it's for this week, I'm going Daniels. If it's for the rest of the season, I'll go Stroud. Just because Nico Collins should be back on Monday night, and like you mentioned, and I think going forward, if Tank Dell can stay healthy and Nico stays healthy, I think he could get back to where he was earlier this year, and closer to where he was last year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The trade question: Amon-Ra St. Brown, James Conner, Brian Robinson for Saquon and Jonathan Taylor. I would like the first side with Amon-Ra, James Conner, Brian Robinson, because, well, first of all, James Conner's playoff schedule is so easy. I've been trying to get James Conner like everywhere, and he's been great lately too. And also, we highlighted this about 15 minutes ago. Jonathan Taylor's his outlook has been diminished a little bit because Anthony Richardson is back as a starter. And so he might lose some equity as a receiver out of the backfield and also at the goal line. So I would go with the first group. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And you still have Jalen Hurts, taking away some of those rushing touchdowns from Barkley. I think Hurts had 2 rushing touchdowns this week. I take the first side too. Unless your receivers are so unbelievably good that you have someone who like a star who's on your bench every week, and you have no running backs. Anything short of that, I'm taking the first part of that, the Amon-Ra side.
I have to ask you a question. Speaking of Jay Daniels, I have to ask you a question and see if you like this. Do you think Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts can combine for 100 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns this Thursday night? And keep in mind that you get 7-1 odds for this. What do you think?
7-1 odds. It's worth a shot, right? Yeah. For a small amount of money. I mean, if I had like even money, I'm saying no, they're not going to combine for 100 yards. But 7-1, that's worth throwing a few bucks on.
Yeah, it's on FanDuel. I was looking at it. Evan actually brought it to my attention yesterday. I like that a lot. I think I might recommend that as a bet. So look out for that tomorrow or Thursday if you're watching on Thursday. All right, so let's get to the next game. We have Patriots 19, Bears 3. This was just a devastating result, I thought, for the Bears. It was so bad that they fired their offensive coordinator. Caleb Williams, just first of all, his accuracy is all over the place. He took 9 sacks, so you want to blame the offensive line. The offensive line was at fault for a lot of that, and they were down their top 2 tackles. But he did take some bad sacks where he held on to the ball too long. He was like some occasions he was like patting the ball for like 6 seconds, and then he would like take a sack, and he was just so bad. And it just was so hard to rely on any of his receivers. I feel like with Waldron gone, they're probably going to play better if they get their linemen back. And so I kind of want to buy DJ Moore low at this point. And to a lesser extent, Cole Kmet, if I need a tight end, but I'm not like too excited about that prospect. But still, like Keenan Allen, just someone I don't want at all. For the Patriots, Drake May, not a great fantasy performance, but this was a tough defense, so I think he could have some better performances later in the year. Kayshon Boutte continues to be pretty good for the Patriots, 4 for 47. Douglas 4 for 50, and then Henry, disappointing game for him, but I expect him to bounce back. So, any thoughts here?
Yeah, this Bears offense has just been so disappointing this year. Luke Getsy is available, by the way, if they want to bring him back. Yeah, too. But Caleb Williams, you're absolutely right. He's got to stop running around in the backfield like he's playing against like us out in like a in our buddies or something like that. It's the NFL, and it's not going to work. And I'm sure he's going to develop and get that under control. But, I had high hopes that, we were going to sort of see a CJ Stroud type year where DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and to a lesser extent, Keenan Allen, we're all going to be producing by this point, and they just have not. So I hope they can get it together. I like what you said about Kmet, because Shane Waldron's got a bad reputation with fantasy tight ends. He just doesn't play any one tight end a large number of snaps. So this could really help him going forward. And then from the Patriots side, it's all about Drake May, and continuing to develop. Unless it's a super flex league, you probably don't want him for a redraft. Of course, in Dynasty, though, he's enticing, and he's been showing off the wheels too, which is always good for fantasy. And then Kayshon Boutte, you're right. He's actually had a decent year. The NFL prospect that never was. I remember so many Devy leagues where you get to keep or you get to draft college players before they get into the draft, and you couldn't. I mean, to get Kayshon Boutte, you would have had to have given up like a number 1 receiver in the NFL before that guy's last year of college, and then it just fell apart. But he's been decent. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens with both of these teams really next year. For right now, it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see the Patriots sign a number one receiver, like Higgins, and then you have Butte and Douglas as second and tertiary options, just being able to get more open with easier coverage. So yeah, it is interesting. Titan asking who will be Vance's running mate in 28, Trump Jr. In my head, I envision Vance and Tulsi actually. I don't know. Just that thought popped into my head. Usually you want your vice president to be like the opposite. So like Trump picked a younger guy, which made more sense. And I guess like Vance picking a woman. But I like Tulsi. But any thoughts on this? Or you can pass on this question.
No, I'm a Vivek guy.
I love Vivek. I love Vivek.
So I actually love this Doji committee that they just that he and Elon Musk just talked about yesterday. I think cutting down on federal spending is something that hopefully everybody in the country could agree on. I'm sure they won't, but Elon Musk had a really good point a week or two ago. I was listening to him speak, and he talked about how if you get $600 worth of tips on Venmo or PayPal, you're going to get audited. You probably won't get audited for $600, but you can get audited. Meanwhile, the federal government goes out and spends trillions of dollars, and it comes back to us in either taxes or inflation. And so, it'd be nice to see some of that wasteful spending you cut out.
I know it's not that you get audited; it's just that the IRS sends you a letter, and they're like, "Hey, you owe $200. Like, what are you going to do? Are you not going to pay it, or like risk fines and then eventually jail time if you don't pay, or it's just such a headache." And so this is what they do. I've got these letters from my business. They're like, "Hey, you didn't pay this. You owe $100." It's like, okay, I guess. Like, what do I do? Like, call a lawyer for $100? Like it doesn't make sense, So
meanwhile, we spent $1.7 million seeing how alcohol affects fish.
Well, Mike, that's super important. Come on.
It's true.
No, I do. I love Vivek too. I feel like he and Vance are so similar. That's why I said no to him. But I could definitely get behind that. I would love that ticket too. So I just thought Tulsi being a woman. I feel like it's the same thing. But yeah, good answer, Mike. Yeah, I like your answer too, more than mine. I like Vivek a lot.
Hey, I'm on board either way.
Yeah. No, I do think Vance is the front runner in 2028 right now. A lot can change, but I doubt. He sees like a downturn in his like I guess political value right now. Like he was so impressive in the debate against Walt, and I thought his I don't know if you listened to the podcast he had with Rogan. I thought it was a great episode where he told all these like funny anecdotal stories. He seemed like a normal dude. I don't know if you listen. Forgive me if you were watching. I'm just telling you what you already heard. But he was talking about how like he was baking with the son, and they had like they crumbled up Oreo cookies that they're putting into a cake or something. And he went to the bathroom, and he comes back, and like the Oreos are gone. And he's like, "Buddy, what happened?" He's like, "Where'd the Oreos go?" And the son goes, "You ate them." So that's like something my son would do. My son's almost 3. And like he was just making that point. It's like, yeah, little kids lie, like make these outrageous lies. That's like what other people do, other people in politics do, which is so absurd. But no, I thought it was for anyone who hasn't heard that Rogan or watched that Rogan podcast with JD Vance, I definitely recommend it. Hugh says, Walt, I've been a follower of yours for years. Great to finally see you live. Well, thanks for joining us, Hugh. I appreciate it. All right, let's get to the next game. We have Saints 20, Falcons 17. The Falcons not getting the Saints in this game, but Younghoe Koo missed a few field goals. It's kind of wild that he used to be one of the most reliable kickers in the NFL. Now he can't hit anything. It's kind of like Justin Tucker this year with 50-yard field goals. He can't hit those. So I just feel like the Falcons just had an off game here. Bijan Robinson still was great, though. 20 for 116, 2 touchdowns. Drake London, he was questionable. He still went 8 for 97. I kind of ruined my Ray McLeod, gambit on DraftKings. Went 3 for 30. We got the overs and receiving yards, but still disappointing. Derek Carr hit Valdez-Scantling for 2 touchdowns. That's not going to happen again, unless maybe you disagree, but I don't see it. And then Kamara was like the only other functional player, although Taysom Hill had a long touchdown call back. Any thoughts on this, specifically with that MVS call?
I don't want any part of Valdez-Scantling on any of my rosters. Last time we got together, I mentioned that I had a league where it's 14 teams, 2 quarterbacks. We start 14 players per week. We start 2 tight ends per week. The free agent pool has no one who's on a 53-man roster. I'll take him, and I'll actually start him there. I start, I think, 8 or 9 more in that league. But aside from that, that's a total fluke. That's not happening again. The other takeaway, and this is late, on this, and I've had this opinion for a couple of weeks, but I think at this point, Darnell Mooney is just better than even maybe a lot of people realize, even though he's been playing well. So he's been good for a while now. But in this offense, London and Mooney are operating like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in that Rams offense. They're both very, very good players. I know you've been doing the DraftKings best ball leagues, in season. I haven't been. I'm curious to know where Mooney's going, because I would be looking at him in the 3rd round of some of these drafts. I mean, that would have sounded absolutely bonkers at the beginning of the season. I get that, but he's had 10 targets every week.
Yeah. Yeah, I can actually pull that up. I can tell you where he's going. He's definitely not going in the 3rd round, because part of that is that he hasn't had his bye yet. So they get pushed. Those players get pushed down a little bit, but not nearly enough, because at this point, if you're doing a league, you're week 11 onward, and so it's only a 4-week regular season. And so it's 4-week regular season. So you're only going to have those bye week players for only 3 out of the 4 games. So if you're like, think about it this way: if you're starting the year and you're drafting someone, and like you're told they're going to miss a quarter of the season, that's what, 3.5 games for normal. Like you're how much would you push a player down for that like missed time, like 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds?
Quite a bit. So let me put it this way. So I usually come out with I start calculating that word is too important for what I'm actually doing in fantasy football rankings. I start creating my redraft rankings for fantasy football around May. Mm-hmm. If nothing changes with this offense, I'll probably have him in the late 3rd or 4th round for next year's fantasy football season. Because I think it's just he wasn't in a good situation with the Bears. That's clear now, and he's been very consistent. That volume has been very consistent, and he's been productive with it. I want to look this up here. Points per game so far. He's wide receiver 18.
Wow.
On the year. So, that's ahead of Zay Flowers, ahead of Devontae Smith, ahead of Deebo Samuel, ahead of Mike Evans. And again, that's points per game. So that's not factoring in the games Mike Evans and some of those guys who've been injured have missed. And I don't see any reason why Mooney's going to slow down.
Yeah, his ADP in this best ball, week 11 best ball onward is 604. So if you drop it in 2 rounds, as we suggested, that's 404, which I guess that makes sense.
That's about right.
Yeah. So I think his bye week is week 12. So once he has his bye week, I don't know if they're going to have week 13 onward. Kind of weird to have 2 a week regular season. But if I will be targeting him in if he falls to like the 5th round or like late 4th, I will definitely be targeting him then. I agree. I mean, he's been so good. Question from Aldo. Would you trade Kyron for Mike Evans and Brian Robinson? Full PPR. Other running backs are King Henry, Bijan, and Chuba. So he's pretty stacked at running back. He can make a move here. I worry about Evans' health. Is he going to be 100% when he returns? Just don't know. Robinson's been banged up, but you get a downgrade a running back, but you get Mike Evans in return. I would try to get a better deal here, but I don't think this is that bad. given that you can trade Kyren, but like Kyren's so good though. I don't know. What do you think about this? I think it's close.
I'm not doing this deal, and I completely understand where he's coming from. You stacked at running back. These 2-for-1s, I hate them because they're never really 2-for-1s. You're dropping someone. Right. If you're going to trade Kyren Williams for a receiver and full PPR, okay, that makes sense. I say aim higher and make it a 1-for-1. I'm thinking Kyren Williams for Nico Collins, Kyren Williams for maybe Cooper Kupp. I'd rather have Cooper Kupp than Cooper Kupp might not even be. I don't even think I'd take Kupp. So how about Nico Collins? If you could get a Jefferson, again, assuming this is just redraft, if you could get Justin Jefferson, you should be looking for one of the top receivers for Kyren Williams, because he was running back 2 overall points per game last year, and he's running back 6 overall in points per game this year. Those top 5-6 running backs in fantasy football make a huge difference. So even though you're stacked, you should be getting a top receiver, and forget about Brian Robinson. Just throw him out, and 1-for-1 Kyren for a top AJ Brown, someone like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Dusto, curious who you guys prefer this week, Devontae Smith or Dobbins? Half PPR. I have Dobbins higher. He plays the Bengals. The Bengals have a soft run defense, although they did limit Henry. They tend to stack the box against him. So, and Smith is dealing with an injury. I expect him to play, but he doesn't seem to be 100%. So I'll go Dobbins. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go Smith just because I usually go receiver over running back when it's close, only because the ceiling's higher. You've got a chance for a 40-yard touchdown, and J.K. Dobbins is probably looking at like 40 total yards in the entire game, especially now that Gus Edwards is back. Kamani Vidal. Oh my gosh, it's been too long since draft season. The day 3 running back.
Yeah, Kamani Vidal. Yeah.
Yeah, he's he's starting to mix in there a little bit too, and I'm going Smith there. I'm going with the higher ceiling.
Okay. So asking you, Mike, pick 2: London Thomas. It's Brian Thomas Jr. Jacoby Myers, Jameson Williams. I know Walt's ranking, so he's asking you this question.
Okay, London's not just one. Well, London's at the very top in a tier all by himself right now. We just talked about how London and Mooney are basically like the Cup and Puka Nacua in that new Falcons offense. If it's just for this, if it's for the rest of the season, I'll go Brian Thomas next. If it's just for this week, I'm staying far away from Brian Thomas because Mac Jones is starting, like Walt mentioned earlier. Jacoby Myers, he's, again, if it's for this week, okay, he's second. If it's for rest of the season, he's third. Brian Thomas is obviously a better overall player, and once Trevor Lawrence comes back, I'd much rather have him over Jacoby Myers. And then Jameson Williams is last. There's too much going on with him. He's having trouble staying healthy. Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting his share of targets. Laporta, we don't know if he's going to play or not this week, but they're still giving a bunch of for this week. So they're still giving a bunch of targets to Gibbs too. So for this week, London, far and away 1. Jacoby Myers is 2, and then Brian Thomas is 3, just based on his talent. He's so much better than Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is a distant 4th for me.
Okay. All right. Let's get to the next game. We have Chargers 27, Titans 17. This is actually 27-10 before garbage time. With Justin Herbert was very accurate, 14 of 18, 164 and a touchdown. I'd say the only blemish for the Chargers here was that they kicked the field goal from the 2-yard line on the first drive of the game. Outside of that, they were pretty flawless offensively. Nothing receiver wise will stand out, but Herbert only completed 14 passes. He didn't need to throw. It was all Edwards and Dobbins, which if you have Dobbins, you have to be a little bit concerned about this. Although I'm not too concerned. I said only a little bit because I feel like this is a game where the Chargers had a big lead and they were able to. I think they knew that they could work in Edwards. I'm pretty sure that they're aware that Dobbins is just the better player. So in tougher matchups, I think Dobbins is going to get more of a workload than this. I could be wrong, but I'd be pretty surprised if it's 15-10 on Sunday night against the Bengals. I think might be closer to like 19-6 or something like that. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's how it would go. For the Titans, it's only Calvin Ridley here. He was amazing, 2 touchdowns, although 1 in garbage time, but garbage time still counts. And then Pollard got banged up. It was all him in the backfield up until this game. Spears came back, but it wasn't like Spears coming back that made this 9-7. It was Pollard missing a little bit of action, and then Spears getting worked in. So what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, for me, Ladd McConkey, I know he didn't put up great stats in this game, but he's the guy to own going forward, especially in PPR. He's been killing man coverage. He's really come on as of late. I think he's like wide receiver 35 or something like that on the year. But thanks for the questions, Dusto. With these rookie receivers, you don't want to look at their year-long rankings for PPR. You want to look at what they've been doing lately. So even though he wasn't fantastic in this game, he had 11.4 points the week before that, 29.1 the week before that. He had a 17.7 game going back, 4, 5, 6 weeks. He's the guy I'm intrigued with going forward because I think he's the guy who could actually make a difference in a championship caliber fantasy team. With the running back situation, I guess I'm just expecting like J.K. Dobbins' feet are going to fall off at some point. That guy is always hurt, and he's had a really nice year. Good for him, But now Gus Edwards popping back in there, getting 10 carries right off the bat. Hassan Haskins stealing that goal line touchdown. They're going to run the ball a lot, but I just never know what they're going to do from week to week in terms of who they're going to give it to. And as far as the Titans go, Ridley's interesting from the perspective that he's been getting a lot of targets lately, but that offense is so bad. He's had so many weeks where he's got 8, 9, 10 targets, and he still just can't do anything with them because his targets aren't catchable. Yeah,
it is a bad offense, but he is garbage time continues to persist, and he's going to get there. What do you think about Quentin Johnson being the next Chris Carter? All he does is catch touchdowns. It's like all he does. He doesn't do anything else.
Credit to him. Everybody had written him off after only his rookie season, and myself included. When we got to training camp this year, it sounded like he was pretty far down on the pecking list. And some people, I didn't believe that Brendan Rice was ahead of him, like some of the reports had. But Brendan Rice was a 7th round rookie receiver. But it sure sounded like, maybe they were just trying to unload him for a day 3 pick and sort of chalk it up as a loss. Remember, Telesco was gone, so you had a new GM. And he's really come on this year, and he's had a pretty nice year too.
Yeah, he's been a pleasant surprise. Yeah, you're right. Everyone wrote him off, and he's done a good job. All right, next game is Eagles 34, Cowboys 6. Dallas could have scored more, but the sunlight interfered. And then Jerry Jones was asked. He was asked after the game. He's like, why don't you put curtains on the window? And he's like, we know where the sun is. What I want to know is where the moon is. Well, to me, it's gonna be full moon, I think, this Monday night. So we'll see if that interferes with CeeDee Lamb too. CeeDee Lamb 6 for 21. And I was talking to you about this before we started recording. I'm like, where do you take CeeDee Lamb if you were to redraft right now? Like best ball right now, he's going in the 3rd round. And I see him landing to me in the 3rd round, and I'm like, I can't take him. Like these Dallas quarterbacks are so terrible; they can't get on the ball. Like I would maybe consider 4th round at this point. It's PPR and it's 3 receiver league, so receivers are a premium, but still, it's just tough to justify the upside there. And it's best ball. It's like you need the upside. Rico Doodle, as we call him on here, is we had one of our co-hosts accidentally call him Doodle, so we've been calling him Doodle ever since. I feel like he's still functional. He had 3 catches, 12 carries. Although if I'm a Doodle owner, I'm so frustrated them seeing Elliott at the goal line, especially after he missed practice because he overslept. It's like you're not going to punish him. It's just so ridiculous. And the Eagles. Hurts was great. Barkley, I think they preserved him. Only 14 carries. You saw Shipley have 9, Gainwell have 7. Don't expect that on Thursday night. I always see these teams, and this happened with the Jets when they played the Patriots. They gave Braylon Allen 12 carries in that Patriots game, and then Braylon Allen had like 3 carries in that Thursday night game because the Jets knew, just kind of like the Eagles knew, that they had a game coming up in 4 days, and so they're like, "Oh, we can't run Barkley into the ground. That'd be irresponsible." So I think we're going to see a big workload from Barkley on Thursday night. So just keep that in mind. So any takeaway here?
Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic point that you just made. That's a way that you could certainly gain an edge in fantasy football if you look ahead of a week in the schedule. You're totally right. Teams are definitely looking when they're playing, the following Thursday, and they're careful not to give their running back 20, 25 carries or some outrageous number of touches before they have another game in 5 days. Unless certainly, maybe if they have a big game on Sunday and the Thursday game is not quite as important, then, you might see the workload sort of wean in that Thursday game. Mm-hmm. But that's a great point that you made. I don't think there's much to take away from this game other than what you said. CeeDee Lamb, he had 10 targets. I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of stat lines like this, though, going forward. He's going to have the targets, but 6 for 21. I'm not saying he's going to have 21 yards every week, but it's going to be hard for him to have 90, 100 yards, consistently going forward. And the problem you end up running into, especially if you're looking at rest of the season with some of these bad actual NFL teams, is these guys get very minor injuries at the end of the year, and there's no incentive to play them. So they'll say, okay, we're shutting them down for the last 2 weeks of the season. So certainly if you're doing the best ball league now, CeeDee Lamb, he could be late 4th round. I'll tell you what, I think this is going to sound absolutely nuts. Rest of the season, I think I'd rather have Darnell Mooney than CeeDee Lamb. And I know that sounds totally nuts, but I want the upside. I don't see the upside with this Dallas offense.
Well, here's the question. Would you rather have Mooney for 3 games over Lamb with 4 games? Because Lamb is at his bye.
No, I'd rather have Lamb for 4 games. I'll give you that. But I would be I'm very skeptical that he'll play those 4 games. I could see his shoelace breaks at the end of the year, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna sit you out and increase our chances at getting Travis Hunter in the draft.
Yeah. I think late 4th makes sense. Right now, I said I saw him falling to round 3. His ADP right now is 210, which is just way too early. I know he's had his bye already, but it's still way too early. Cassandra asking, would you trade any of Pollard, Chase Brown, or Josh Jacobs for Lamb in PPR in a team desperate for receiver help? Not Jacobs or Brown. Maybe Pollard because he's a little banged up right now. I do like Pollard though. So if anyone, it's him, but probably not. It depends how desperate. Like if you're like it's a 10 out of 10, you have nothing else, then sure. Then I guess trade Pollard. But outside of that, no. What do you think?
I feel Pollard for Lamb because Pollard's in the same situation. That's another dumpster fire of an offense, and he could easily be shut down at the end of the year too. Yeah, and if you've already got Barkley, and I think Pollard for Lamb, you're at least locking in those 8, 9, 10 targets into your lineup every week, and then I guess you hope he catches a touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. The last of the late afternoon games, we had Cardinals 31, Jets 6. I wrote on the site that this reminded me of, or just like the image popped in my head, like this is the Jets' funeral for the 2024 season. I know they're not done. They still have a chance to make the playoffs because the AFC is so top heavy, and like the first 6 seeds, I feel like the first 6 seeds, unless like those teams suffer injuries, like the Chargers, if Herbert were to go down, like they're all going to make the playoffs. It's all about like who like anyone could win the number 7 seed at this point. So they're still alive, but they just look so dead in that game. Arizona dominated completely. Rodgers looks so lost when he blitzed him. Like he's not throwing a lot of interceptions. He's just checking the ball down right away, and he's not even looking downfield. It's just so bad. Fortunately for Rodgers, he plays Gus Bradley this week, and Bradley doesn't blitz. So maybe he'll bounce back here, but outside of this upcoming game, I don't really trust the Jets at all. So for the Cardinals, Murray looks fantastic. 22 of 24, 266 and a touchdown. He was incredible. James Conner, he disappointed us because he only had 33 rushing yards. We bet his over rushing yards, and of course it went to all went to Trey Benson. But Conner went 5 for 80 as a receiver. This Arizona team looks really good. And they've had such a tough schedule. They're 6-4, so they could make a run late in the year. So any thoughts on this game?
No, just, you mentioned Rodgers hasn't been good, and some of these older quarterbacks, that their age really starts to show once the weather starts getting bad later in the year. So he already, you could already tell he's not himself. I don't see it turning around for Aaron Rodgers or this team. And with the Cardinals, I guess the biggest takeaway was Trey Benson. As you mentioned, he got some more time that wasn't just garbage time this week. A little bit more than what he received earlier this year. But certainly that job, still seems to be totally James Conner's. And I think some of this was just sort of load management.
Yeah, Sue saying Jets don't play defense anymore. Here's a question, and you'll probably know the answer because I'm talking about the Jets game. I heard this question: which team is giving up the most yards per play on an EPA basis ever since Robert Saleh was fired?
Is it the Jets?
It's the Jets. Yeah, it's wild. They have all this talent, and they just suck. Like they don't tackle. They don't they blow coverages. Like that tackling effort by Sauce Gardner on McBride was embarrassing. He just propelled them forward. It's like he helped them. His team is just so poorly coached. Ulbrich is just in over his head, and the fact that he can't focus on his defensive duties. I think that's just such a bad idea. It's okay, fire Saleh, it's fine, but don't take the defense coordinator duties away from Ulbrich. Give the job or the interim job to a special teams coordinator. Kind of like the Saints did. I think that's the best approach.
And Todd Downing's not a good offensive coordinator either. I mean, he's been a mess. Where the one good season the Raiders have had in the last 21, 22 years was immediately destroyed because he was their quarterback coach. They got rid of Musgrave, who was their offensive coordinator, because they didn't want to lose Todd Downing, and promoted him and just went back to being a bad offense. He got another shot with the Titans, and we saw what he did there. He didn't last, and with the Jets, it hasn't been any better. So that team's a mess, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get better even after this year, because you've got to figure Joe Douglas is probably going to get fired after this year. So you bring in a new GM and a new coach. You're probably bringing in a lot of new personnel. You wonder how much of this team is still going to be there after this year.
Yeah, it's a disaster. They traded away resources to go all in this year, and they have nothing to show for it at the moment. Again, maybe they run the table, Rodgers said we're going to run the table. Was it 2016, I think, and maybe that happens, but it doesn't look that way at all. So trade Amon-Ra for Achane and DJ Moore. I would do this if you really need, if you need a running back, but Amon-Ra and Achane are both, I think, mid first round guys at the moment. And DJ Moore is not doing much, but like I said, I would buy low on Moore. So you're potentially getting a fifth round player for free in a swap for mid first round guys, in that best ball leagues I'm talking about. Amon-Ra St. Brown's ADP currently is 110. Achane is 107, and this is PPR. So I would do this. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't usually like the 2-for-1s, but these are two legitimate players you're getting back. There's no Brian Robinson or Jacoby Myers or sort of, redraft end of the, flex play type in this deal. DJ Moore and Devon Achane are both certainly starters. So I like this deal as well.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the Sunday night game. We had Lions 26, Texans 23. The highlight of this game is when Dan Campbell is coming out of the tunnel and he's interviewed. It's what do you need to do to come back? He's we need turnovers, and they get a turnover as he's talking. So I thought that was pretty hilarious. The Texans scored 0 points in the second half. But they didn't have Nico Collins. Like they were expecting to get him back this week, and he was out. I expect him to return this Monday night, and I expect him to play very well. Joe Mixon, tough matchup for Houston here. Only 25 for 46 in Mixon. Detroit has a great run defense, so Mixon's going to be a lot better against Dallas this Monday night. But this might be a preview of what's to come because, like I said, Mixon in the fantasy playoffs, just very difficult matchups for him. So that's why I would consider offloading him maybe after this Dallas game. For Detroit, Gibbs was fantastic, 19 for 71 and also 2 for 37. Laporta was the leading receiver, but he got injured. And then St. Brown was St. Brown. Goff had 5 interceptions and only completed half of his passes. One pick was on a Hail Mary, but still. Just a rough game for him. And then, he, to his credit, he rebounded a little bit in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. So what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I tried to tell everybody not to play Nico Collins. I had 4 or 5 different people reach out to me on Saturday and Sunday and say, I've played Nico Collins, right? Ian Rappaport says he's playing. I had a feeling that he was either inactive or the plan was to play him 10 snaps because he didn't. So it's a guy who missed the last month. And then he didn't practice at all on Wednesday or Thursday, got in a limited session on Friday. That's not the plan that you have for a guy who you're planning to activate and play a full workload on Sunday night. So I had a bunch of people text me on Sunday night saying, hey, sorry, we should have listened to you on this one. But he's certainly going to be back this week. And I think that helps Tank Dell, and it helps CJ Stroud, for obvious reasons. So, I think going forward, Dell and Nico Collins with Stroud should be fantastic. And if you're in a deep dynasty league, and Mechie is sitting on the waiver wire, he's worth a shot to sort of roster to see what he does for these next couple of weeks with Stephon Diggs not out. Now, don't get me wrong, a regular redraft league where you have 15, 16 roster spots, you don't want John Mechie. But I'm talking about some of these dynasty leagues where you've got 30 or 35 roster spots, he's a little bit interesting. And, what he did on Sunday night was a little bit interesting. And then from the Lions, I'm just monitoring Laporta this week, but he sure has been a disappointment. I thought he was going to have a much better season, even with Jameson Williams stepping in and taking more of a role. I knew Gibbs would take on even more of a role than he did than he had last year. He had like 85 targets or something like that last year. But I still thought Laporta would be more involved than he has been. So hopefully he's healthy and he plays. But yeah, he burned me in a lot of redraft leagues this year.
Yeah, I do like your Mechie call. I was always a fan of him, and then unfortunately he had the medical issues. But it looks like he's coming back. Maybe he's not full strength yet. Maybe he continues to get better. And so yeah, I would definitely own him in a very deep league like that. Would you trade Neighbors for Metcalf, or will it get better with Drew Lock? I would rather have Metcalf right now. Right? What do you think?
I'd rather have Neighbors. So I feel like Metcalf is one of those guys. He almost always finishes between wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 25, like every single year. And he's one of those guys. There's a value in like the 4th round or so. I just think Malik Neighbors has such a high weekly upside. Especially in that Giants offense, there are times where he gets 10, 11, 12, 13 targets a game, and even though that's a bad offense and the first half was weird on Sunday, I expect him to see a lot of targets going forward. And if they make the quarterback change, I don't know if it'll be even better for him, but it sure sounds like whoever is going to be playing quarterback is going to be pressured to throw him the ball even more than, what he's seen so far. I think he had an interview or something a couple of weeks ago where he had a huge first half and then didn't have a lot of targets in the second half. And he was like, yeah, I was open the whole second half. So, I'm taking Neighbors there.
I think the Andrew Thomas injury really derailed what he was doing just because Daniel Jones doesn't have time in the pocket to find him deep downfield. I would definitely agree if the Giants still had Thomas. One thing to note, though, is that Metcalf has already had his bye and Neighbors hasn't. So, if you're desperate for wins here to make the playoffs, keep in mind if you get Neighbors, or if you have Neighbors over Metcalf, you have one fewer game to win. You're not going to have your receiver one for one of those weeks. So just make sure you keep that in mind. But maybe for the fantasy playoffs, I think you could definitely argue Neighbors over Metcalf, but just remember the bye week situation.
So real quick on that, Malik Neighbors right now, wide receiver 7 overall in points per game.
Yeah.
So I know but you're right. The bye week thing is a big deal. If you need to win these last few weeks to get in, you're not going to have him for one of those weeks.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the Giants' schedule because a little foolish because they had the Panthers and Neighbors didn't do much. So in the fantasy playoff schedule, okay, they have the Ravens, Falcons, and Colts. That looks great. That looks great. So okay, yeah, if you're only focused for the playoffs, I now change my answer to Neighbors. But if you were trying to get into the playoffs, I think Metcalf will be the way to go. So yeah, it looks like you're preparing for the fantasy playoffs. I would go with Neighbors then. All right. So anyway, we have the Monday night game: Dolphins 23, Rams 15. Rams just made so many mistakes in this game. Just every time you look, they were doing something stupid. Just missing blocking assignments, fumbling the ball, throwing interceptions. It's a complete mess for this team. Although Puka Nacua 9 for 98, Cooper Kupp 7 for 80. So those guys at least look good. Davis Allen we call him the spicy meatball here, 5 for 34. I called him the spicy meatball play in week 18 last year in DFS, and he actually almost won me $100,000, except I foolishly sat James Conner in favor of Zamir White, which turned out to be such a big mistake. I would have won the spy on DraftKings if I didn't make that move. I had the winning lineup. I took Conner out because I heard on a show on Sunday morning like Conner's gonna be the highest owned guy. I'm like, I better take him out. And I put Zamir White, who scored like 11 fewer points. So jokes on me. I finished like 10th in the spy. Even
you'll never forget that one.
Never. And Zamir White's so bad this year too. So yeah, it was so brutal. Anyway, I did have Davis Allen in that lineup. I stacked Carson Wentz with Davis Allen because it was week 18, so it was like super cheap quarterback, super cheap tight end, and then just put the rest of the studs in my lineup. So anyway, I liked seeing Davis Allen get some work here. I always thought he was an athletic tight end, with what's that guy's name? The starting tight end for the Rams, who's injured right now. Tyler Higbee. Yeah, with him out, I'd like to see Davis Allen get more work instead of Colby Parkinson, who's more of a blocker. Anyway, for the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, he caught a touchdown, which just kind of salvaged his day, but still 3 for 16. Such a big disappointment with him. He said he aggravated his wrist injury in practice. He said he injured the wrist when he was arrested ahead of week 1. Kind of feels like so long ago, right? Like that happened. But anyway, like this offense is all Achane, and I'm sure Mike McDaniel missed Alec Ingold because in those games where they started Tyler Huntley, there were 2 games where Ingold has as many targets, he had as many touches as Waddle and Tyreek Hill combined, which I just thought was insane. They did it twice. So maybe this is the secret to McDaniel's success that Ingold was not available. So any thoughts on this game?
I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about Davis Allen. So I think those of us who follow the NFL draft really carefully, like you and I do, we sort of know what types of tight ends these guys are, right? When they come into the league, and then it gets to fantasy season and everyone's talking up Colby Parkinson. We're like, wait a minute, no, why are they playing Colby Parkinson? We want to see the Davis Allen, the receiving tight end, get more of the work. So I totally, I'm completely with you on that. But no, not much of a takeaway from this game. The Rams, I love that offense in fantasy because it's very predictable every year. You've got, Kupp, and when they have a good second receiver, it used to be Robert Woods back in the day or Brandon Cooks, and now obviously Puka Nacua, and then whoever Sean McVay has at running back. I mean, he'll trust anyone. If they had Darrell Henderson's getting 20, 25 touches in a game. So whoever their starting running back is tends to be a bell cow. So certainly Kyron Williams, hasn't disappointed or been anything other than that this year. And with the Dolphins, obviously they've been a disappointment. I would like to see Tua get back on track so Waddle and Tyreek Hill regained a little bit of value. And I'd also be kind of interested to see what happened if Jalen Wright got a little bit more of the work share or the workload. But I think aside from that, the one big thing was just Raheem Mostert didn't have a single carry. So that was, I don't know if that's a big deal, but it was a little bit eye-opening.
Yeah, Mostert fumbled last week, and he didn't get a single carry after that. And it's interesting that he didn't get a carry this week. He got a couple of receptions, but he didn't run the ball. And I keep talking about best ball, but I've been drafting Jalen Wright in like the 16th, 17th round, just in case Devon Achane goes down. And if that happens, I feel like they're going to go with Wright more so than Mostert, given that he's fumbled a lot this year, and maybe they don't trust him anymore.
And now that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Jalen Wright, late in the season, if there were an injury to Achane, I'd certainly want him in my lineup. That's someone I'd be excited to throw him in one of my two running back spots. Whereas, again, we're talking about the Broncos running backs. Whichever one starts, it's nice if you have a bye week, but you're not going to be excited to play a running back from a bad offense. It's like Alexander Madison. No one's winning a fantasy championship with Alexander Madison in their running back 2 spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And there are only 3 bye weeks left, 11, 12, and 14. So there's not much time left for these scrub guys to get into your lineup. And about Davis Allen, I liked him heading into this year, knowing that Higbee was out. And I always thought that Parkinson was a blocker. And I played him in the showdown in week 1, and then he got injured. And we haven't seen him since, but then he returned this week. I'm like, oh, yeah, Davis Allen's back. This is great. So I was happy to see him have a good game. So if you're hungry for a tight end and just, you can play matchups here, if you see Davis Allen having a good matchup, I think you can stream him, going forward. So I guess that's about it. Thanks, guys, for watching and commenting. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. This is great. I love doing the show with you. Any final thoughts or anything you want to plug, perhaps NFLroughdraft.com?
Yeah, NFLroughdraft.com is just our NFL draft website. It's a hobby. We don't even keep it running all year. So we'll be starting up again toward the end of the college bowl season. And, we've been pretty fortunate to be accurate over the course of the last, 15, almost 20 years at this point. But yeah, aside from that, I really just appreciate you having me back on to talk fantasy football. And I appreciate all the people who watched and asked questions. I think I like answering questions more than, or I think I appreciate answering questions more than you guys, even appreciate asking the questions. So thank you for watching and for throwing those questions out there to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to doing more shows with you, hopefully in the off season, or maybe later in the regular season. We'll see. We will be back tomorrow about 15, 20 minutes after the Thursday night game's over. We'll be joined by Andy Isco, talking about the Thursday thoughts for Week 11 NFL picks. We'll be back on Saturday with Tom, talking about the final thoughts for the Week 11 NFL picks, and then of course we're going to get Tom's thoughts on the Mega Man 2 playoff bracket that we were talking about yesterday. I have to ask you, have you played Mega Man 2 at all when you were a kid or something?
Oh, when I was a kid, yeah, for sure.
Okay, all right. I don't know how much time you have left. If you have like 2 or 3 minutes, I need
of course. I
need your opinion on this. Let's see. Pull it up here. So I posted this video here. This playoff bracket here. They did an AI run where these robot masters played each other. You had Airman versus Heat Man. You had Bubble Man versus Metal Man, which I feel like a 1 versus 16 almost. Quick Man versus Crash Man, and Woodman versus Flash Man. And then they did this playoff bracket where they would battle each other, and the winner would move on. Who do you think won this bracket?
Oh, gosh. I wasn't very good at Mega Man. I was more of a Castlevania guy myself.
I love that too.
I don't know if I have an informed opinion on this. I was terrible at this game. I don't think I even got to half of these boxes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll be talking about that with Tom on Saturday because Tom has done Mega Man speed runs. He used to do that a lot. He used to run videos with them. So we'll get his opinion on that. Spoiler alert. Oh, not spoiler, but like the winner, I projected, I thought Metal Man or Quick Man would win, and I was wrong. So not one of them. All right, guys. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description of the merch store. Mike, thank you again. And we will be back tomorrow. Guys, have a great night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.